Hi, this is Becky Spain, your instructor for business communication. Today we will be covering Chapter 8 in Excellence in Business Communication. This chapter is entitled Writing Routine and Positive Messages. This chapter focuses on writing routine messages and routine positive messages, those that are most suitable for what we call the direct approach. Now, we've talked about that a little bit, and we'll go a little bit more in depth in this chapter looking at the direct approach. In Chapter 9, we will look at how to convey negative information. In Chapter 10, persuasive messages, which are both a little bit more complicated to write. This is a fairly simple chapter because we all like to get positive information. We'll begin with learning objective number 1, which is to outline an effective strategy for writing routine business requests. A routine request has 3 parts. It has an opening, a body, and a close. Using the direct approach, you're going to open with your main idea, which is a clear statement of your request, and then you're going to use the body to give details and to justify your request, and finally you will close by requesting specific action. So much of the vital communication between a company and its customers is really just simply about routine business matters. So usually your message will either be a routine request asking for information or action, or it could be a variety of routine positive messages that you're going to need to write. So making requests is a routine part of business, and in most cases your audience will be prepared to comply as long as the request is reasonable. By applying a clear strategy and a tailored approach to each situation, routine requests will be effective and efficient and really pretty simple to write. Begin routine requests by placing your initial request up front. This is where it will stand out and get the most attention. Of course, getting right to the point should not be interpreted as a license to be abrupt or tactless. Careful presentations include paying attention to your tone. Even though you expect a favorable response, the tone of your initial request is important. So soften your request with such words as please and I would appreciate. Assume your audience will comply. You can generally assume that your reader will comply with your request when the reason for it is clear, and especially when they can see the benefit for themselves. And then finally, be specific and state the need precisely. So now that you've begun by stating your request up front, the next thing that you want to do is explain or justify your request. So use the body of your message to explain your request. Make the explanation logical and smooth. It should just be an outgrowth of what your opening remarks were. If complying with the request would be a benefit to the reader, be sure to mention that. And if you have multiple requests or questions, ask the most important questions first and deal with only one topic per question. If you have an unusual or complex request, break it down into specific individual questions so that the reader can address each one separately. These considerations not only show respect for your audience's time, but also gives you a more accurate answer in less time. And then the third step, of course, is the courteous close. So close your message with 3 important elements. First, you need a specific request that includes any specific deadlines. Second, provide your reader information about how you can be reached. And finally, use an expression of appreciation or goodwill. Concluding your message by sincerely expressing your goodwill or appreciation will show respect for your reader. And when you ask your readers to perform a specific action, ask for a response and make sure that you state clearly the date and time, if appropriate, that you need the response by. However, shy away from saying thank you in advance. Many people find that presumptuous. If the action that they're taking, your reader is taking, really does require a thank you, you can thank them after they've provided the information that you've requested. Moving on to learning objective number 2, which is to describe 3 common types of routine requests. So most of routine requests that you'll be writing will likely fall into a few main categories, such as asking for information and action, or asking for recommendations, and making claims or requesting adjustments. All 3 of these requests are similar in structure and your approach, as well as the desired result. So whether you're asking for knowledge or action, each requires time and effort of the reader and therefore should be handled professionally and with care. So let's look at asking for action and information. When there's a need for information or for someone to take action, the best course for the sender is to simply ask. Your request simply needs to say what you want to know or what you want the reader to do, why you're making the request, why it may be in your reader's interest to help you. If it's a more complex situation, you may need to provide some extensive reasons and justification for the request. So be sure to adapt your request to your audience and to the situation that you're writing about. Asking for recommendations. So in business, there's going to be times that often arise when you will need to respond to a request about people in your organization. When you're the one asking for the recommendation, it's really pretty routine, and you just need to assume that your reader is going to honor your request. So you'll just want to organize your inquiry using the direct approach, with an opening, a body, and then a close. If the situation is one where you're asking for someone to write a recommendation for you, maybe like for a job that you want to apply for and you're needing to have a recommendation written, first of all, make sure that you call that person and talk with them over the phone to make sure that they know that you're going to ask for them to write that letter. A one-on-one call is a much better thing to do than just sending an email or a letter. Then you can follow up that request with an email or a brief letter, and then in your opening clearly state that you're applying for a position, and you may want to specifically let them know what position that is so that they can write a letter based on the specific situation. But sometimes you just ask people to write a general letter and they'll just talk about your general good points. In the body, be sure to include any information that you might want the reader to use, such as anything that's in the job description that you're applying for, so that they have some of that information. And then finally, in your close, just express your appreciation. Make sure that they have the information as to where you want that letter sent to. If you want it like a PDF that's emailed to you, or if you're needing a hard copy mailed to you. If you want a hard copy mailed to you, it's really a good idea to include a stamped self-addressed envelope in there, so all they have to do is write the letter and stick it in the envelope. So couple of tips for you there if you're asking for recommendations for a job. Sometimes you will find yourself in a situation where you need to ask for a claim or an adjustment on something that you have purchased from a company. So it's important to maintain a professional tone throughout your communication. Make sure that you take a rational, clear, and a courteous approach. You need to assume that a fair adjustment will be made, and just use the direct approach as you write out your request. Moving on to learning objective number 3, outline an effective strategy for writing routine replies and positive messages. So there will be times throughout your career when you'll be the one responding to the similar requests that we just talked about. If someone's needing a job recommendation, or perhaps they're making a claim or requesting an adjustment with your company against a product or service that they purchased from you. So when responding to these types of just routine day-to-day requests, you just are sending positive messages, routine messages, but you still have several goals. You want to communicate the information or the good news. You want to make sure that you're answering all of the questions that they've asked and to provide any details that they're needing. And you want to leave your reader with a good impression of you and of your company. Because readers will generally be interested in a positive message that you're writing, you can use the direct approach with a routine reply, or whenever you're writing a positive message. Basically, just a quick review. Remember, place the main idea, your good information in the opening, then use the body to explain any relevant details, and then close cordially, and be sure to highlight any benefit to your reader. Kind of covered all 3 of these slides in that explanation, so let's move on to the next slide, which goes over learning objective number 4. Describe 6 common types of routine replies and positive messages. Now, most routine and positive messages fall into 6 main categories. They're either an answer to a routine request, they're grants of claims and requests for adjustments, they're recommendations, they're informative messages, they're good news announcements, or goodwill messages. So chances are that as you get into the business world, if you're not already there, from time to time, you're going to have requests for simple information that you need to respond to. If a simple yes or some other straightforward information is all that's required, then of course the direct approach is going to be your best response to that. Just open with your main idea, use the body for your explanation and any details, and then close courteously. Remember that responding promptly and graciously will positively influence how people think about your company, about you, about your company's products, and about your department. So those are the easy ones to write. No matter how well run your company is, there's going to be times whenever you make mistakes, and there's going to be times when you don't make mistakes, but your customers or stakeholders perceive that you have. As you get letters of complaints asking for requests or an adjustment, you need to remember that this can represent a turning point in your relationship with your customer. In other words, every mistake is also an opportunity to improve your relationship with them, but you need to respond appropriately in order for that to happen. So how you respond to the complaint depends on your company's policies for resolving issues, and then your assessment of whether the company or the customer or a third party is at fault. In general, you want to take the steps of acknowledging receipt of the customer's complaint, sympathizing with the customer's inconvenience or frustration, and this is really important. If you can write in a way that sympathizes, even without you necessarily saying that what happened was the company's fault, but it recognizes the customer's frustration or inconvenience, then that puts you on the same side as the customer and will help in your relationship building with them. Next, you want to take personal responsibility for setting the matter straight. So you haven't necessarily said that what you guys did was wrong or assigned blame on either side, but you've just taken responsibility to get this thing resolved. Explain precisely how you're going to do that, and then take steps to repair the relationship. Then follow up to verify that your response was correct. And then just one final tip, just make sure that you don't overpromise and underdeliver. So don't promise more than you can deliver. It's always better to say what you're going to do and do what you say, but it would be better to underpromise and overdeliver than it would be to overpromise and underdeliver, because then you're just going to perpetuate the situation and continue to cause frustration for your customer or stakeholder. So we talked briefly a second ago about how you might request a recommendation from someone, but let's say that you're the person who is writing the letter of recommendation or reference. Before you respond, the first thing you need to do is to check with your company regarding policies about writing recommendations or references. The reason for that is because many companies have been sued based on the information that was given. So if you write a letter saying that an employee is amazing and they get the job and they're not amazing, the company can sue you. And if you write a letter saying that the employee was not performing up to company standards, then they can sue you for saying things that kept them from getting another job or that defamed their character. So many companies today have very strict policies and guidelines about what you can or cannot say when you're writing a letter in response to your job. So it's an employee that worked for you at that company. Now, there are also going to be times when you receive requests from people that you know or have worked for you in the past at a different company, and then your choice to write a personal letter for that person is going to be a decision that you're going to have to make on your own. But when you're writing for a recommendation for a company that you're presently working for, cannot overstate. Make sure that you know what your company's policy is about writing those types of letters and what information that you're allowed to report, because it would not surprise me if your company's policy is simply to say, yes, Sam did work for us from this date to this date, and verify that information, and that's it, because for the most part that is company policy across the board today. However, there will most likely be times when you're going to be asked by somebody that you know personally to write a letter, or that you've known in the past. So let's just go over this real quickly. So if you decide to write the letter of recommendation or response to request for information about a person, your goal is to convince readers that the person being recommended has the characteristics necessary for performing a job excellently or very well. For things that you might want to consider is project assignment or other objectives that the person is seeking in the job that they're applying for. And having a copy of the job description for the job that the candidate is applying for is very helpful in knowing what types of things to put in the letter. But be sure that you put the candidate's full name, your relationship to the candidate, the position that the candidate held under you, or that whatever is your relationship with candidate, and then any facts or evidence relative to the candidate, and then a comparison of the candidate's potential with that of peers, if that information is available, and then end with your overall evaluation of the candidate's suitability for the opportunity. There is a sample on page 236. I'm going to say that at some point in your life you're going to be asked to write a letter, so you might want to make sure that you review that and maybe even make some notes and stick that somewhere in your professional documents so that you have a sample of what a well-written letter looks like, and you can use that as an example when you go on to write. So this is a copy of the letter that's on page 236. So let's look at just sharing routine information. So all companies send routine information out, such as updates on projects or order status notifications. In the opening of these types of documents, simply state your purpose and briefly mention the nature of the information that you're providing. You need to provide necessary details in your body, and then end your message with just a courteous close. And then there is always announcing good news. When you've been given this assignment, it's usually a lot of fun to get to be the one to write the message or craft how you're going to share good news to employees or stakeholders or customers. It's wise to look for opportunities to share good news. It's a good way to develop and maintain strong relationships, whether it's with a customer or with employees. Because good news is generally welcome, go ahead and use the direct approach for this. Good news announcements about a company's success are often communicated in news releases or a press release, which is a specialized document used to share information with the news media. In most companies, news releases are usually prepared by specially trained writers or people who are in your Office of Public Information. So you may not be the one writing it, but if you are the one, it just follows the customary pattern for writing positive messages, which is just simply sharing the good news, followed by any details that you want to provide, and then a positive close. Now, if you're not in public relations or in the Public Information Office, you may not be writing very many news releases, but a traditional news release usually has a unique approach because they're not really written for the ultimate audience. So if you're wanting to get a story in the newspaper, it's not necessarily written for that audience of the newspaper. Normally, a news release is trying to create interest for an editor or reporter who would then write the material that would eventually be used for the larger audience. Having said all that, I would also say that thanks to social media and the internet, the nature of news releases is changing, and many companies now view it as a general purpose tool for communicating directly with customers and other audiences. So if you go to somebody's website, a lot of times you'll see news releases, and these were actually created as direct to customer news. And oftentimes these will include links that will take them to the reader to other shareable content. Fostering goodwill. So all business messages should be written with an eye toward fostering positive relationships with whatever audience it is that they're writing for. However, there are some messages that are specifically for fostering goodwill. So these messages can be used to enhance relationships between business contacts and also with employees. You can use goodwill messages to enhance your relationship with customers, with colleagues, or with others by sending friendly, unexpected notes with no direct business purpose. So one primary opportunity for sending goodwill messages is to congratulate someone for a specific business achievement. So someone is recognized in the community for something that they've achieved in a business, at a business level or at local award. I know that my son just recently received a community award for his position, his work in the community, and those are really great opportunities for people who know him to send him to send them a goodwill message, to just acknowledge and congratulate them. It's also important to recognize the contributions of employees, suppliers, colleagues, other associates. A message of appreciation may become an important part of someone's personnel file. So when you write the message of appreciation, mention the persons or the people that you want to praise so that they can keep that on file, because it may be something that they may need to use for a personnel review in the future, such as at the time of an annual job review. And then finally is a condolence letter. These are brief personal messages that are written to comfort someone after the death of a loved one. So though we all hate to write messages like that because it's difficult, it can feel intimidating to write, it really has a strong impact on the people that you write those letters to. So whether it is an employee, a colleague, someone that you have a associate relationship with, it can have a really strong impact. It doesn't really need to say too much. It really just needs to convey a simple, heartfelt message. It needs to be short, simple, and of course, sincere. Try to write from your heart, and you think about that person, and so like the audience view of that. And the one thing I will mention on writing condolence letter that the book does not mention is to try to stay away from giving advice at such times. So, things like, she's in a better place, or, she's no longer in pain. Those kinds of things sometimes are not very helpful. So just to express your heartfelt concern for what they're going through is usually the best kinds of things to put in a condolence letter, and stay away from words that might give them advice on how they can overcome their heartache or things like that. So it'll be much more appreciated if you just are sharing your heart with that person. And I hate to end on that thought because it's kind of like a downer, but that would conclude our lecture for Chapter 8. And we will pick up with Chapter 9 in looking at how to write negative messages. So, though not something that we like to think about, will certainly be a part of your future. And we want to give you some tools to make sure that you are doing that most effectively. So I will see you at Chapter 9.